Did you feel at the time brave putting your hand up and saying, I need help? Because sometimes there's that addiction syndrome is, I don't need anyone to help me, I can be.
Yeah.
Did you feel brave?
I felt surrendered.
How does someone with fame, fortune, and fans across the world still end up broken inside? Keith Urban's story isn't just surprising, it's deeply heartbreaking. At 57, the country music icon hides scars most never see. But what nearly destroyed him also gave him a reason to fight back. Stick around till the end, because what's uncovered in his journey will leave you shocked, moved, and questioning everything you thought you knew about his life. The boy who lost everything. Keith Urban wasn't born into music. He was born into chaos. In Whangarei, New Zealand, life started quietly, but that peace didn't last. His family moved to Caboolture, Australia, chasing better chances. What they found instead was hardship and tragedy that would shape him forever. When Keith was just 9, his childhood home burned to the ground. Everything was gone in one night. Clothes, toys, photos, memories turned to ash. The fire wasn't just a disaster, it was a marker in his life. From that point forward, survival wasn't just physical, it became emotional. Losing everything that young taught Keith what emptiness felt like. But the fire was only one piece of the pain. Keith grew up under the weight of a father who battled alcoholism. Robert Urban was unpredictable. He was the one who bought Keith his first guitar, but he was also the one who created fear. Keith later admitted that his father never once told him, "I love you," not even in passing. This emotional vacuum did something deep to him. While other kids were learning to ride bikes, Keith was learning how to read moods, how to stay quiet, how to disappear. Music became more than a hobby. It was his escape. His guitar became a safe place when home didn't feel safe. By 6, Keith had learned to hold the guitar like armor. His fingers knew what peace sounded like, even when his home didn't. He didn't just play to get better, he played to feel better. By the time he was 8, he was already performing in bars. Not for money, not for fame, just for relief from the storm inside. One of the rare bright spots in those early years was Sue McCarthy, a local music teacher who gave Keith his first real lessons. She didn't just teach chords, she offered stability. Even though her house was cold, her lessons were warm. Keith learned for the first time how powerful music could be through her. He got something from those lessons that his father never gave him: support. There was a big difference between the cheers he got in public and the silence he had to deal with at home. People clapped for him on stage, but no one hugged him backstage. That gap between what the world saw and what he lived through would stay with him for decades. It taught him early how to smile while hurting. That pain never fully left. It just got better at hiding. Keith never chased fame in those early years. He chased peace. Every note he played was an effort to fill the silence he grew up with. While some kids dreamed of awards and bright lights, Keith dreamed of calm. Fame was an accident. Music was survival. Even before he had a hit song, Keith already knew heartbreak. Not the heartbreak of a broken relationship, but the kind that comes from never feeling safe, from watching a parent drink too much, from never hearing kind words from the one person meant to protect you. These wounds would later shape his music, but first, they shaped the man. While the world applauded, Keith silently spiraled, fighting demons no award, crowd, or chart topper could silence. Broken Strings in Nashville. At 24, Keith Urban stepped into Nashville with nothing but a guitar and hope. He had left behind everything in Australia, his family, friends, and comfort zone, for a dream that didn't welcome him. The music capital of the world turned cold fast. Labels didn't care. Producers overlooked him like background noise. Rejection hits hard and often. Keith played small gigs for almost no one, sometimes performing for free just to stay on the radar. He lived in a run-down apartment with no air conditioning, scraping together change just to eat. Nights were the hardest, alone with his thoughts, questioning if chasing music was worth the pain. He felt invisible, worn out, and defeated. But even in the silence, something inside him refused to give up. Music wasn't just a dream, it was his lifeline. No matter how far he fell, he couldn't walk away from it. To make ends meet, he started writing songs for other people. Some of those tracks became radio hits, but his name never made the spotlight. He formed a band called The Ranch, and though they saw some success, it never pushed him out of the shadows. The spotlight stayed just out of reach. Keith began to disappear behind the songs he wrote for others. The constant grind wore down his spirit. After surgery to remove polyps from his vocal cords in the late 90s, he was given prescription meds to manage the pain. That's when a new problem started: addiction. What began as medical recovery turned into daily reliance. Few people knew how deeply it spiraled behind the scenes. Keith kept his struggles hidden. He showed up to sound checks, interviews, and shows pretending everything was fine. Behind the scenes, though, he was drowning in stress, pain, and pills. The pressure to succeed, mixed with unresolved trauma, was pulling him under. His friends noticed the change. The light in his eyes was fading, and his once genuine smile became a mask. He was slowly slipping into a dark place, overwhelmed by the weight of expectations and the silence of his own suffering. He thought about quitting more than once. Some nights, he'd cry himself to sleep in that little apartment, staring at a ceiling fan that didn't spin. Music didn't feel like a gift anymore. It felt like a curse. And in 1988, things reached a breaking point. Keith had a serious overdose scare that nearly ended everything. That night shook Keith Urban awake in the most brutal way. As he hovered on the edge of life and death, he realized he wasn't just drowning in rejection, he was being consumed by the pain he'd buried for years. Nashville hadn't only tested his talent, it had torn into his spirit. The overdose could have ended everything before his story even took off. But it didn't. Somehow, in that rock-bottom moment, he found a sliver of strength. From that terrifying low, Keith didn't just rise, he began to rebuild. Slowly, painfully, he started to crawl out of the darkness toward redemption. He didn't talk much about it in interviews. Most fans didn't even know how bad it got. But behind the scenes, he was learning the cost of chasing dreams with an empty heart. That scare didn't fix everything, but it made him see clearly. He had to choose: keep crashing or climb out. By the end of the decade, Keith was still far from famous. But something inside him had shifted. The pain, the pills, and the rejection hadn't beaten him yet. Nashville had tried, but Keith Urban wasn't done. Not even close. How fame made it worse. Keith Urban finally broke through in 1999. After years of setbacks and self-doubt, his song, "But for the Grace of God," climbed to #1 on the US country charts. It should have been the beginning of peace, but the truth was the opposite. Fame didn't heal the damage, it just made it easier to hide. He was smiling for the cameras while silently falling apart backstage. By 2002, Somebody Like You made him a country superstar. It became one of the biggest hits of the decade, playing on radios, stadiums, and award shows. But Keith was unraveling faster than ever. His insecurities, addictions, and panic attacks didn't vanish. They followed him onto red carpets and private jets. The world saw a rising icon, but he still saw himself as someone barely holding it together. Behind the Grammys, the CMAs, and the global tours was a man gripped by fear. Keith admitted to feeling like a fraud, even when accepting awards on live television. Few knew he was hiding panic attacks right before performances. There were moments he couldn't breathe backstage, trembling while trying to smile for fans. The pressure of perfection slowly chipped away at whatever joy he had left. One of the darkest moments came during a tour when he abruptly walked off his bus and vanished. For nearly 24 hours, he was gone. No calls, no explanations. He wandered into a nearby city and drank alone until he passed out. It was a breaking point he kept quiet, buried under layers of fame. Very few people even knew it happened. During all this chaos, Nicole Kidman entered his life in 2005. Their connection seemed like a miracle at first, a Hollywood star and a country legend in love. But Keith's demons didn't take a break. Fame had fueled his addictions, and even Nicole's presence couldn't stop the downward spiral. He was still carrying years of damage, and their relationship became collateral in the crash. Just 4 months after their wedding in June 2006, Keith checked into rehab again. The timing stunned fans, but for Keith, it was survival. He had hit another wall: too much alcohol, too many pills, too many secrets. This time, though, someone stayed. Nicole didn't walk away. She held firm while the man she married fell apart. The rehab stint in October 2006 was a turning point, not just because of treatment, but because of how Nicole handled it. She didn't blame or shame him. Instead, she stood beside him during the worst of it. That kind of support became a foundation Keith never had before. For once, he wasn't alone in the fight. Even after treatment, the road was uneven. Fame still brought temptations, and trust had to be rebuilt. But Nicole's presence became a quiet strength in his life. She was the first person who saw both the talent and the trauma, and stayed anyway. That stability helped Keith confront parts of himself he had always avoided. Many people assume that success solves everything, but Keith Urban is proof it doesn't. At the height of his fame, he was barely surviving. He had the awards, the money, the headlines, but none of it filled the hole. The panic attacks didn't care about his chart positions. The addiction didn't fade with applause. Fame gave him access to everything he once dreamed of. But it also gave him more ways to escape, more ways to run, and more pressure to pretend he was okay. That weight nearly crushed him. He learned that pain doesn't disappear just because the world calls you a star. And for Keith, those early years of success were some of his darkest. There's something haunting about someone who finally makes it and finds out it still hurts. Keith Urban lived that reality. He reached every milestone and still felt empty. The outside world saw a legend in the making, but inside, he was still the broken kid from Australia, searching for peace in a storm of applause. He lost nearly everything, but found redemption in the place most people fear: absolute darkness. The love that rebuilt him. It took a while for Keith Urban to get better. He wasn't fixed by fame, but love gave him a reason to try again. Nicole Kidman didn't save him. She helped him get back on his feet. Keith felt calm in a way he hadn't felt before because she was always there. It wasn't about love. He needed security, which he never had as a child. Keith changed in some way when Sunday Rose was born in 2008. He had to face how broken his past was when he held his daughter. The kind of father he never had was someone who was always there, kind and honest. 2 years later, Faith Margaret was born through a surrogate, and Keith took this new life even further. Being a dad made him realize how far he'd come and how far he still needed to go. Staying sober wasn't easy, but I could choose to do it. Keith stayed clean by making habits that kept him in the real world. He marked each new year with thanks instead of praise. He relied on therapy, writing in a notebook, and long talks with himself when he wasn't in front of cameras. He didn't just stop drinking. Every day he started choosing peace. Keith writes in his journal every morning while he is alone in his yard. It's what he does to calm down before the world gets loud. He thinks about the life he ran away from and what might have happened if he hadn't agreed to help. He is not running in that picture of him sitting with a pen in the early morning light. His attention is on himself, the silence, and the life he built, piece by piece. As Keith healed, so did his music. The loud party songs gave way to deeper lyrics, more thoughtful melodies. Albums like Ripcord, Graffiti You, and High in 2024 didn't chase hits. They explored truth. He let go of writing for radio and started writing to understand who he was becoming. You can feel the growth in every note, raw, unsure, but honest. His performances changed too. There's less flash and more presence. He connects with fans not through perfection, but through shared struggle. He often uses interviews to speak openly about addiction and mental health. Especially to young men who feel pressure to hide their pain, his voice offers something real. Keith still lives in the spotlight, but his favorite moments now happen far from it. Family dinners where everyone's barefoot and relaxed. Early morning walks with Nicole before the world wakes up. Playing guitar on the porch while his kids run across the lawn. These aren't grand stories, but for someone like Keith, they are proof he survived. The man who once vanished on tour to drink alone now spends quiet Sunday mornings building Lego sets with his daughters. The same man who once felt like a fraud beneath the bright stage lights now embraces his truth without shame. He no longer needs to numb the pain or chase approval. He simply shows up, fully present. Keith doesn't talk endlessly about recovery. He lives it, day by day, moment by moment. Each sober day is a silent triumph, not broadcast to the world, but deeply meaningful. This version of Keith Urban isn't louder or flashier than before. He's calmer, more grounded, more human, and above all, more whole than he's ever been, proving that healing is quiet but powerful. Keith doesn't try to pretend his past didn't happen, but he also doesn't let it define him. The sadness, the darkness, the near ruin, they're part of the story, but not the ending. What came after the fire was softer, clearer, and entirely his own doing. That's what makes his journey so powerful. Today, Keith Urban lives with quiet power, sober, focused, and more connected to his audience than ever before. The music that heals millions. Keith Urban no longer wants to be famous at age 57. He moves with purpose and picks peace over stress. Being slow, quiet, and clear is now his main goal after decades of chaos. He would rather be somewhere quiet than crowded, whether it's Sydney, Nashville, or New York. He doesn't get as many chances to be in the spotlight, but when he does it on purpose. Keith still plays music, but not all the time. The long, never-ending trips he did as a young man are over. He loves being at home with his girls in the evenings and having coffee with Nicole in the morning. The roar of the crowd is less important than connecting with one person in the crowd. He sings not to show off, but to connect with people. He helps new artists by giving advice based on knowledge, not pride. He quietly gives money to children's hospitals and rehab centers, which are causes that are close to his heart. In 2025, Keith's childhood trauma sparked a campaign led by fans that gathered over 1,200 stuffed animals for kids in hospitals. Keith matched every gift with a handwritten note. It wasn't a press move, it was a healing move. He has picked up drawing again and is using it as a way to relax. Each painting shows feelings he used to drown in drink. He now meditates every day. There are no drinks or pills, just air, music, and room to think. There is order and kindness in his life now. "Peace is louder than applause" is a line that Keith often says to both friends and fans. The way he lives is the same as what he says. Thanks, not pride, are what every show ends with. Not to be praised, but to honor the road that almost killed him. He's no longer afraid of quiet. It makes him feel better. Keith often comes back to the stage by himself to think. One lights up, one guitar, not any effects, and no backup band. The crowd stops moving when he plays a stripped-down version of "Blue Ain't Your Color." There is more to this than just ability. It's moving towards health. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Click on the next video popping up on your screen for more amazing content.